Hi, kiddo. Have you heard about the owl and the hummingbird that danced forever and ever and ever? Have you? Well, they met at evening time, of course, because that's when owls are just waking up. So, how could they meet at any other time? And the hummingbird, of course, was sleepy after a long day of getting nectar from beautiful flowers, red ones, pink ones, purple ones, blue ones, and lavender ones, your favorite color. And she was just flying home to her beautiful nest in the top of a tall sycamore tree, and the sun was just setting beyond the far mountains, and the last rays were shooting across the land, and her silvery wings shimmered in the sun's last rays as she flew back to her nest. But before she got there, she looked up and she heard his great wings flapping through the air. And she looked up and there was a great white owl soaring in the sky. And she said, "Whoa, that's cool." And he looked down and he said, "Hey, who are you?" She said, "I am Samantha the hummingbird. I have been eating wonderful nectar from beautiful flowers all day long. Purple flowers, yellow flowers, blue flowers, orange flowers, and lavender flowers, your favorite. And now I am heading to my nest for a wonderful, peaceful night's sleep." And I looked up and there you were, flying with your great majestic wings above me. And, well, I've heard of owls, but I've never quite seen an owl. Not this close before. And he said, "Well, I am a great snowy owl." And she said, "Ooh, I've heard of you. Don't you live in the Arctic North?" And he said, "Yes, I'm on vacation. I'm visiting my cousin Vinny." That's what he was doing down here. So she said, "Oh, wow. Could I ask you some questions?" And he said, "Sure." And she said, "What's it like in the great white Arctic North?" And he said, "Oh, it's much colder than here. I actually like it here quite a lot. I'm thinking of relocating." She said, "Ooh, well, that would be kind of cool." Well, he said, "Yes, and what other questions do you have?" And she said, "What's it like to be an owl?" And he said, "Being an owl is the greatest thing ever." And she said, "Why?" And he said, "Because I get to fly around at night, and I get to soar endlessly in the beautiful, silvery moonlight." She thought about it for a minute. She thought about how she flew around in the sun during the day and how much she loved that. And she said, "Wow, I gotta tell you, that sounds pretty cool. I've never done it. I sure like flying around in the beautiful sunlight during the day. It makes my feathers shine and they're iridescent and they're sparkly. And I get to hum, and all the flowers are open, and I get beautiful nectar from all the different flowers: blue, green, yellow, orange, and lavender." And he said, "Well, that sounds pretty exciting too." He said, "I know, maybe we could go along with each other someday. And maybe we could see how the other one lives. You could see how I live at night, and I could see how you live during the day." And she said, "Oh, that sounds fabulous and fantastic all at the same time." He said, "I think it sounds fabulous and fantastic myself, too." And so they decided to do it. And she said, "Well, since it's nighttime, why don't we start with you?" He said, "Okay." And so the sun was now down behind the hills, and a nice cool breeze was blowing because it was springtime, almost the beginning of summer. So it was warming up nicely. And this was in the northern states where it was a little bit cooler a little bit later, but it was finally starting to warm up. And so he said, "Well, first I'm going to ride out over this beautiful grassy field." I'm going to look for my dinner. Oh, that's actually my breakfast. It's actually his breakfast. And she said, okay, I'll come. He said, okay, now stick close. And so he lifted his great wings. And he flew off over the field, and she flew with him. And she'd never flown after the sun had gone down before. And she said, how will I be able to see? And he said, soon the moon is going to come up and you'll be able to see just fine. And if you're not, you just stick with me because I shine. I'm beautiful, brilliant white, and you can see me wherever I go. And she said, oh, okay. And so she followed him out over the field. And sure enough, off in the distance, over the hills, on the other side of the valley, she saw a silvery crest of the moon just breaking over the top of the hills, shining its moonbeams across the forest and across the fields. And she said, that is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. And it might not have really been the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen, but because she'd never seen it before, to her right then it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. It was so cool. And he said, yes, I love it. It is so peaceful. There's something so peaceful about the night when everybody else is sleeping and you're one of the only ones awake. And she said, yeah, I can see that. So they soared over the field. And then they soared back. And she said, do you see anything for your breakfast yet? And he said, no, not yet. I'm going to go rest in a tree. And so he flew high, high up to the top of a tall fir tree. Landed, and she sat down right next to him. And she felt very warm and safe next to him. And he said, if you get cold, I can put my wing around you so that you're warm. And she said, well, not yet, but it might get cold later at night. I've heard it gets really cold in the middle of the night. He said, yes, it does. And she said, so I'll take you up on it later. And he said, okay. And she said, well, now what do we do? And he said, well, now sometimes I just like to sit here and I like to talk to my friends. Because owls like to do that a lot at night, you know. They like to talk to their friends. It's one of their favorite things to do. And she said, ooh, can I listen? And he said, can you listen? Of course you can listen. That's what we're here for, is to get to know each other and have fun. And so he said, all right, now, maybe I'm going to listen for my friend Roger and my friend Sandy. They're usually around at this time. I'm going to see if I hear them. Must be very quiet. And so they were very quiet. She heard it. She said, I've heard that sound. I've woken up in the middle of the night, and I knew it was owls. What are they saying? Well, that's my friend Sandy. And she's saying, good evening. How are you doing? What are you doing? And where are you? Because I want to come. And so he said, now I'm going to tell her where I am. So listen. She got real quiet. He goes, that just told her that I'm in the top of this tree. And so, shortly thereafter, up came Sandy. Landed right next to him. And the little hummingbird Samantha, she said, oh, this is so cool. I have never seen two owls in my life. I've never seen even one owl, much less two, up this close. And Sandy said, hello, I'm Sandy. She said, hi, I'm Samantha. And I'm hanging out tonight with your buddy here because I want to know what it's like to be with an owl and what owls do at night. And so Sandy said, well, mostly we just fly around and look for stuff to eat, but the best thing of all is coming up. And she said, what's that? And she said, the dance. The dance. And she said, the dance? And he said, yes. Most people don't know it, but in the middle of the night, in the very middle of the night, when almost everybody and everything else is asleep, we all dance. And we dance in the air and we dance in the sky. Because we don't dance on the ground because we're birds. And it's the most beautiful dance ever. And she said, do you think I could learn to dance too? And he said, yes, I do think you could learn the dance because you're a hummingbird. And hummingbirds are so swift and so agile. I do believe that you could learn the dance. We'll show you. And so they flew around for a while and they looked for some stuff to eat, and they found a few things to eat. And she had fun flying around with them as the moon rose higher in the sky. When it was brilliant silver, and pretty soon the forests and the fields were so lit up, almost as bright as daytime, Samantha felt. But not quite. And finally, right in the middle of the night, when the moon was directly straight overhead, they said, okay, are you ready? She said, yes. And pretty soon, some of our friends are going to be joining us. So let's go. And so they lifted their great wings and they soared up into the sky. And Samantha watched them. She said, wow, this is the greatest thing ever. Because hummingbirds can just hover in the sky, and they can sit there and they can turn their heads around and watch. And she did that for a few minutes, and she watched as about 7 or 8 more great owls came out. And they all began to fly around each other, and in and out and around each other, and in patterns and circles and up and down and over, with their great wings spread out high. And for the next 2 hours, Samantha watched those beautiful owls as they did their middle of the night dance in the beautiful moonlight, and it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen in her life, and she couldn't believe that she'd slept through it ever since she was a baby hummingbird. Pretty soon she said, I'm gonna go join them. And so she did. She flew up there, and she had watched their patterns and their movements as they flew under each other and over each other and around each other, and patterns around and around and around, and a great circular beautiful owl dance. And she joined right in, and she went up and down and around and over. For the next hour, she danced with the owls. And you want to know something? It was the most fun she ever had. And she became such good friends with those owls. They became her best friends. And from that day on, she danced with them, not every night because she had to get some sleep, but several times throughout the month. She would wake up and she would dance with the owls. And she did it for years and years and years and years. She did it her whole life, and the more she danced with the owls, the better she got, and the more friends she made. And she became the only one in that forest who danced with the owls. And she did it for years and years and years. And she became such good friends with them that she did it for the rest of her life and the rest of their lives. Even when they became old, when the owls became old, and when Samantha herself became an old hummingbird, still they would meet in the middle of the night in that clearing in the forest. And still she would dance with them and dance and dance through the wee hours of the night while the beautiful silvery moonlight shone down, lighting up their wings and their eyes. And they became fast friends forever and ever and ever. And they danced and they danced